The beginning is the most important work. That's a quote by Plato.
Plato.
Dr. Nick joins us now with more.
I mean, we've got to give him some credibility.
He knew a lot, didn't he? Wow, some wisdom. I just love your book. It's
Thank you,
Resources
Whitney.
for Living Well. And I was reading this the other day, and I said, you know what? You and I need to talk about this, because we don't talk enough about beginnings. I think a lot of times, and maybe some of that is out of fear. Sometimes we don't begin something anew because it may not work out, it may be a bad business venture, it just may be too much work. But beginnings are important.
Very important. And I was just kind of thinking when you said that, not to take off beginnings, but maybe the problem is that we don't end. Oh. Maybe we don't end the day well, or we don't end things well and say, okay, there's closure. It's done. So that the next experience is the beginning of it. You know what I'm saying? That endings and beginnings go together. You can't really have one without the others. So we end and then we begin. And sometimes when we begin, we don't begin correctly.
Okay, yeah.
That's the issue.
Tell us how to start correctly.
Well,
or better.
You know, let's say you want to talk to one of your children about a problem. How do you begin the conversation? Do you begin the conversation with, we got to talk about this problem?
If you're mad, unfortunately, it blurts out.
Or do you begin it by saying, you know, we haven't talked in a while, let's check in, how are you doing? And then maybe you slowly get into it. How do we begin? You know, I always love to ask people when you play a game, any kind of game, aren't you going to first ask before you play, do you know how to play? How are we going to play this game? How are we going to, what's this evening going to be like? Is this a business meeting, or is this a fun meeting? You see how you get in clarity. Mm-hmm. When you wake up in the morning, how do you begin the morning? What's the ritual in the morning? Do we immediately turn on cable TV to watch all the bad news? Or do we begin with maybe an inspirational quote, or, you know,
quiet time,
or as you were saying, going outside and looking for the sunrise, if you're up early.
Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of turning on the news. I'm a news junkie, and there are probably much better, healthier ways to do it. But I'm usually in there cooking the kids' breakfast, so
okay.
You know, it's just kind of I'm catching up. But I could probably do it much better.
Well, yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, because you're cooking breakfast, so that's a good way to begin because you're caring for your children.
Right. But you said it's important how we begin to wind down at night.
That's, I love the beginning of the end of the day. And I have a little, it's like I just know that I've got to start slowing down. I can't just go to bed and fall asleep. I've got to slow down. I'm going to
say that about 80% of us probably do it with the help of a television. That final hour.
And that's okay.
I like that you said that.
Or a book. I watch TV for an hour and unwind, kind of brainless. I don't watch anything that's going to get me excited,
sure.
Like a violent movie or news that's all going to get me riled up.
Sure.
In other words, the beginning of that end needs to be a coming down. It's a coming down. And I thought you were going to also say something else that we use to come down.
Tell me.
Alcohol.
Oh.
And it needs to be really confronted. We don't need alcohol every night to come down, and too many people do.
Right.
That's how they begin the ending. And let's be honest, Whitney, that's not a good way to begin the ending.
Right.
Or any forms of unhealthy.
Sure.
Is coming down.
You know, even if it is, you know, a glass of wine or two. I mean, this is true.
That's
a couple
fine.
of years ago, I would, while I was cooking dinner, I got into the habit of having a glass of wine while I was cooking dinner. And then I might have a glass of wine with dinner. And so finally my husband looked at me and he said, you know, you're drinking a lot of wine during the week. I mean, you know, and I said, I don't know if it was a cost factor or he was wondering if it was a health factor.
Sure.
But he said, you know, I think that's probably a bad idea. Or you may ought to look at that. I think he said it more gentle than that. And I did, and I thought, you know, you're right. We can just get in those little habits of, oh, yeah, have a glass of wine and da-da-da, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's Monday through Thursday, and you're thinking,
Mm-hmm. Which really brings it again to how do we begin a confrontation?
Right.
See, because obviously, just the way you say it, Robert did it in a way that was not threatening or putting you in a defensive mode. At least that's the way
Sure.
it's coming across.
And
That's those kind of beginnings are important, Whitney, because we have anxiety about sometimes communication. So we need to have a beginning that says, let's make this conversation healthy, or this confrontation not negative.
Right.
What can we get from it?
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting when other people point things out. And I do think we all have to be honest with ourselves. And I did have to go, well, I don't know, I just kind of got in a habit. You know, look, and it wasn't anything I had to have. I mean, so I just stopped opening, a bottle of wine before I started cooking dinner. I just stopped cooking.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you changed the beginning.
I changed the beginning.
You changed the beginning.
You're right.
See, and that's again what we're talking about. How do we begin things? How do we begin? Again, meetings, or how do we?
Can I
begin?
read something from here? Because I like how you say this. May we begin each new encounter with mutual respect.
Mutual respect.
New tasks.
And say it. Say it. Let's make sure we're respectful of each other. We start with that mutual respect. Well, I know that. Well, I know you know that. I'm just reminding us.
Okay. Good point. Begin new tasks with specific goals. You say we don't do that enough. We don't set the goals.
Yes.
Begin new projects with flexibility.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Flexibility.
It's one thing to have the plan. The plan's going to possibly or probably change.
It will change.
It's okay.
Everything does, right? I mean, nothing's going to go according to plan.
Yeah.
Begin new decision-making processes with integrity, and begin new roles with clarity of responsibility.
I like that too.
Yeah, well done.
I wrote that.
You wrote that a couple years ago. See, still good, still timeless.
Still good, a new beginning.
That's right. Have a new, beautiful beginning to this day. Thanks for starting it with us, and thank you, Dr. Nick.
Yes, happy Sunday.
Much more of Weekends with Whitney right after this.